Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Truth Wanted, the live call-in show where we want to hear from you and we want to know what you believe and why. I am very fortunate this week to have a special guest, as we always do on Truth Wanted. Before we get to talking to you, Chris, I want to say that we do have open lines right now. So if anybody does want to call in throughout the show and talk to us, call in sooner than later at 512-991-9242 or through your computer at tiny.cc/calltw. So like I said, we always have a special guest on this show, and I'm really excited because when I get to host, I get to pick the guests, and I go after people that I find on YouTube that I think are really great content creators and need more exposure. So this week, my special guest is Chris. Hi, Chris.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm good. It's good to be here. Thank you so much for having me and for liking my content enough to ask me to come.
I do. I really like your content. You're a pretty new creator, kind of in the ex-Christian deconstruction space. I found your content a few months ago, and I just think it's like it hits a different level, if I were to say so, with just your very honest, authentic kind of reflections on the whole experience and also kind of your path out and your path forward. So for anybody in our audience who has not heard of you yet, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Okay, so I'm Chris Keaton, as it says. And yeah, I've only been doing YouTube for like a year. Actually, it's been like a year and a half now. And I was super scared to start, but I had been thinking about starting for a long time. And like you said, I started making videos about like my deconstruction process kind of through the reactionary model of reacting to like really weird videos that I would find online or Christians kind of being weird. A lot of the things that I like or react to are just what I think of as weird. Like, oh, this is weird. I think I'll talk about it. So yeah, it's been a really fun and interesting adventure, like figuring out how to do YouTube and growing my channel slowly but surely. And yeah, it's been really fun.
That's good. I noticed like you have a good kind of mix of like having these kind of very introspective, deep, like, reactions to content. Sometimes you'll touch on things like religious trauma or like just those really like those. That's what I found interesting about your content is that you kind of like put this language to something that I was like, that's exactly what it's like when you're sitting and watching these, other people online making Christian content or even just something that maybe was done in the past. And like some of the ways that you describe it, I really can relate to in that way. But you're also really funny. I find your content really funny because you do things in between. It's kind of similar to like, like you said, reactionary YouTube content where it's just very engaging and I can laugh at the same time as like having a deep thought about, what you're talking about. So well done.
Well, I love that. Yeah. Thank you for that feedback because that's what I'm going for.
Yeah.
I kind of got out of Christianity, like, the very first big step that I took was when I was 19 and now I'm 28. So it's been almost a decade of me like figuring all of this out and only a year of me doing it on YouTube. But the reason I wanted to get on YouTube was because I didn't know anything. Like I realized at 19 that there was just so much that I didn't know and that I was just like fucked up in my brain with. So I wanted to like talk about it. But that's part of why I was scared too, because I didn't always have the language. And a lot of my YouTube time has been like finding the language through my writing for a video or getting really triggered by something I find online and then spending time figuring out what is the trigger, what is going on here, and then talking about that because I'm like, somebody else has to be feeling this way. And I just love understanding things from that level, from a psychological level. So yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm not the only person who's kind of discovered you. I think there are a couple other well-known people kind of in the atheist community, the larger community anyway. This person named Shannon Q, I think.
Yes, I've
Shannon
interacted
Q,
with Shannon a little bit.
and
Yeah.
Paul. I think they're a couple. Like I think they're
Paul Logia as well. Yeah.
they have also commented and been, fans of your content. I think I had a couple of things here, like some of Shannon's endorsements of you, that you had great, well thought out content, that you're tragically underrated, that you need way more people watching your content. What else did she say? She also pointed to the fact, and this is one of the reasons why I invited you on the show, is that you recently were holding like an interfaith dialogue with somebody that you know who is still a Christian, but maybe not evangelical Christian, and you had a pretty long, in-depth conversation about that. So there's lots of kind of different things that you've done with your channel so far.
Yeah, and I'm hoping to do even more. But yeah, that interfaith dialogue. Well, first of all, I just want to say I love Shannon and I love everything she talks about. So when she started talking about me and I saw that Paulogia thing where she said all those nice things, I was like crying a little bit. I was like, from joy, I was like, oh, thank you, Shannon. But yeah, I don't remember the other thing I was going to say, actually. I guess thanks, Shannon.
Thanks, Shannon. Yeah, I was watching that. I happened to be watching that stream. I think Dan was on it. It was another fellow YouTuber, or it was Paulogia's YouTube, I think. Anyway, I tuned in for a little bit because we had our fellow host Dan was on it, and a couple of people, and they were shouting out like, who is some new up and coming people on the YouTube platform that we want to kind of draw attention to. And Shannon like popped her hand up right away. It was like, everybody has to check out this person, and I 100% agree with her. So. If anyone in the audience hasn't seen your content, they should go watch it. I personally really like the video where you commented on the youth dramas that people did, with the Lifehouse music, because I definitely was a part of that.
Yes, I was too. I did that shit.
Yeah, me too. And I always got chosen to be either like the pregnant teen or the demon, because I have curly hair, and they used to like back comb my hair up to make me look like kind of crazy, and I was always a demon for some reason. I never got to be an angel or like Mary in anything. I was always like the rebellious teen, so maybe it was like a bit of prophetic like foreshadowing. I don't know.
They could see it in you. They were like, her heart is corrupt, so we're just gonna put her in.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I got typecasted pretty early on as being like the rebellious one. Yeah.
Makes sense. I got typecast as, well, I don't know. I played a drunk person most of the time, or I was just like, they didn't want me to do anything like major. They just wanted me to like be in the back as like part of the crowd or something. So,
right. Yeah. So there's a lot of experience there that like anybody who kind of grew up in the, I think like late 90s, early 2000s or onward, there was like a whole culture that was happening in youth group at the time. And I think that like a lot of us can relate to it. And for people who weren't like in that era, like I think it's good for maybe the older generations too, to see like what it was actually like for us. Cause I think a lot of parents would just kind of dump us off at youth group and think that everything was good. But there was actually like a lot of kind of internalized, trauma shit that was going on in those youth group experiences. Right. And I feel like that's kind of what your channel is doing, is kind of like going through these, kind of seeing the humor, because there's a lot of funny parts to it. But also kind of breaking down like, oh, this thing that I was taught kind of actually messed me up for like a long time.
Yeah, I try to bring the humor to it because there is so much of that heaviness there. There was heaviness when we were in youth group, and there's heaviness as you're working through it. So like, I've always found that humor has helped me move through it in a safer way for myself, where it doesn't feel so depressing and so angry, because I've had years of my life of being stuck in more of that, like everything sucks and fuck this and fuck all those people and fuck youth group. But there really was like a youth renaissance going on when in the late 90s and early 2000s. It was like the movement, because Christians understand that if you indoctrinate children, the next, it was all about the next generation, because if you indoctrinate children, they will grow up and remain in the church and like continue the thing. Fortunately for a lot of us, we are recognizing, because it was so traumatic, because it was so intense, they were focusing so heavily on it. We are now being like breaking away from it because it was too much. Whereas most people would just kind of go with the flow because it was enough to, have their community, have connection, believe in God. But for us, it was a fucking lifestyle. Like you had to do that shit every day, walk your talk. And yeah, it was it was pretty horrible. One random memory I have is my youth pastor told us when I must have been 14, I think, and he told us, I believe that none of you are going to have children because Jesus is going to come back too soon for that. And
Yeah.
it freaked everyone out.
That's crazy. That's
Yeah.
so out, like just in your face too. Like I was raised in a Pentecostal denomination. Like we definitely believed in like, you know, this premillennial stuff and like the rapture and all that. I definitely had a sense that like I wasn't going to grow up. Like
Nope.
I remember getting to 25, specifically for some reason 25, and think just having like a total quarter life meltdown because I was like I didn't think I would be around this long, so I don't know what to do now. Like I was just froze, like totally froze because I was like I thought that the big revival would have happened by now and that Jesus would have come back, and I was like, oh shit, I have to actually like plan my future now, and that was like a kind of a moment. Anyway, I did want to ask you, like, what kind of was your background in the church? Like, what kind of denomination did you grow up in?
I grew up in an evangelical Pentecostal church, and it was with the Assemblies of God, which is like pretty big, especially internationally. Like that is where they focused a lot of their time and money was missionary work, which is actually what I thought I was going to be doing because there was nothing else to do in life. Like I didn't think I was going to live that long, like you said.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, and this is the most important thing I could be doing. So yeah, I was focused on missions work personally, getting there to that missionary level. But it was very fundamentalist. You know, the earth is only 6,000 years old. Everything in the Bible is a parable that you can, you know, use as metaphor, but it's also literal. Like everything actually did happen.
Well, there's the main meaning, which is literal, and then this underlying meaning, which you can apply to your life today, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And it was pretty full on in tongues. It was very charismatic kind of church. It was like a baby mega church too. We had cameras that were filming everything. My dad was on staff as one of the pastors. So I was in it.
Yeah.
You know, I was fully.
Yeah, you're there for all the background stuff too. You see how see how the sausage is made. Like you see that background stuff on how they make church happen, right? Like this is why I relate to your content so much, because that's exactly kind of my background. And I grew up in the same kind of like charismatic church, but I was also like on the worship band, and like I saw how the production was made, right? And it's not until later on that you realize that that's kind of messed up. Like how all of it's like this manufactured response, this emotional response that they would draw out of people, especially in like these highly emotional environments. So.
Oh yeah, and they were pouring, like, part of that youth renaissance that I mentioned earlier was how much money they were pouring into the, what do you call that? Like the AV, the audio visual, you know, they had the lights and they had the interesting sound or stage design, and it was a fully immersed experience of like emotions. And of course we were taught to like associate that with God. So we had pretty intense times, and in some ways I look back on that and I'm like, when I was in it, I thought I was having a good time and I thought it was like meaningful. And in some ways I can extract some meaning from that. But later in life, you just realize how much manipulation went into that and went into convincing you of something that is not true.
Right. Yeah. So I wanted to I want to hear like how you kind of worked your way out of that belief, but also so I want to hear about that, but I also want to think back to like your younger years too. Like, were there any things that kind of like stood out to you as odd, or like that gave you that doubt, or I guess the word now we would call it cognitive dissonance? Did anything stand out for you like as you're growing up before you kind of hit your deconstruction stage? Anything like that for you?
Yeah, I would. Now that I look back, you know, hindsight's 2020, as they say. Now that I look back, though, I recognize how much was. But the indoctrination was so early and so deep and so heavy, and I was so involved that it was fairly easy to kind of write those things off, even though I was left with a discomfort of like not having the question answered. So things like, if people are born in another place with another religion, like I've been born into this, how how can God expect them to have this exact truth? Because my sect was one that was like, this is the exact truth. Other Christian sects are not doing it right. Like, we had a big thing about speaking in tongues, and I spoke in tongues for several years.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah, hell yeah. Maybe we should have a speaking in tongues segment later.
Yeah, we should.
Right.
If we don't get enough callers, we'll have a little segment where we'll just have this conversation.
Perfect. And for anyone who's into like spirituality, light language is just the new speaking in tongues. So watch out for light language, because it's the same thing.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it was some of those kind of questions that I see now being used on shows like this. People asking people who have clearly never taken the time to like answer honestly about these kind of questions. Those always rubbed me wrong, but it was always fairly easy for me to be like, yeah, but God's cool, so whatever. I'm just gonna keep doing my thing.
And like, how easy is it when you get given like that, like, well, God's ways are above our ways, or like just like a very, very easy answer, like a kind of placate. What's the word I'm looking for? Do you know what I'm? Yeah. You can fall back on that. Like, I'll never understand God's ways, so like I don't know. I feel like that's written into the whole thing, is that we're not supposed to fully understand it. So like, doubt's normal, but
Exactly.
Like,
it's so easy to, when there's an eternal being who knows everything and who knows everything about you, even when you don't know, like how many fucking hairs you have on your head. It's like, wow, he even knows that kind of shit. So I guess
super personal.
Yeah, it's like, wow, he's been counting. But no, it's like, yeah, why wouldn't you just trust that thing? Why wouldn't you just lean on that? Because that feels good. And last year especially, actually, like the entire year, I was having like a grieving year of not having that anymore. And just like you said, when you hit 25, I've been going through a process, especially after 27 is when it hit me, of being like, I need to plan my life. There's nobody I can rely on who's going to like do it for me. I need to fucking take action. I need to do shit with myself and just decide. Because before, I thought when I could just lean on God, that it was all going to be taken care of. And so once I didn't have God, I still had the expectation, this will all be taken care of. But as a fucking decade of like moving through that and things not getting taken care of until I did something about it, I got really angry about that. And like I said, last year, I was just grieving, like, oh, the universe is not just here taking care of me. Like, God isn't here laying it all out before me. This isn't a path for me to discover. This is a path for me to build and to create. Right. This is a life for me to live. And that's what I've been rolling with.
That sounds like, that's exactly it. I know there's going to be a lot of people who can like relate to that. You're expecting, I think that was part of it too, and why we see so many people kind of coming out of it now, is like there was a big buildup on this future and like the expectation on how it was going to all unfold. And then as regular life circumstances come around and you have to actually deal with it, and you don't have this magical answer to it, you're left a little bit like stunted with how to deal with it. Right. So there's like there's this big hurdle when you first start kind of getting out of it. And how are you going to go about that? So my question, I want to kind of, you had told me earlier that it's been a while since you kind of actually made your way out of the faith. You've been creating content about it for the last year. So like, what was it for you? Like, what brought you out? Was it like really quickly, or did it take a long time? What's your deconstruction story in a nutshell?
Yeah, in a nutshell. Yeah, keep me honest here, because I think I could like just end up rambling. But it really was like a long process of several years that I'm still doing now. So I think I've heard people come with questions on like social history, like how did you just get out? And it's not a singular thing. But if I tie it back to like what really started me, what was that over the threshold step? Mm-hmm. It was the night that I got really drunk. And I was playing a drinking game with a board game, and I don't remember what it was, but we had a bunch of like colored lights up and this board game, and it was like some kind of bourbon. And yeah, I had never really drunk before that. I think I had had a few sips of things, but this was when I was 19. and I just didn't understand the reality that I was in this drunk state. So I was like walking around, and like at first it was fun and it was enjoyable, but then at a certain point I wanted to be done. And so, you know how alcohol makes you more vulnerable sometimes. I was feeling extremely vulnerable,
Right.
and I was outside, and I decided to pray to God. I was like, look, I believe in you being able to move literal fucking mountains. I wanted to be a healer, like a faith healer, and actually doing things. And I spent a lot of time like looking for people who were actually doing that, but all I ever found was bullshit healings, like the leg growing thing.
Yeah.
Even when I was a Christian, I knew that shit was fake. But I wanted to like grow people's legs back, or, heal their cancer, like things that were super tangible. So I decided, like, I'm going to pray to God. This is like a last ditch attempt for him to make me not drunk right now, because that'll be easy.
I'm totally getting that. Like, it just like, if you can move a mountain, you can definitely sober me up like that, right? It makes sense. The logic is there.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm like praying and I'm crying and I'm having a hard time, and nothing happens until my friend Sam comes out, and he was a history major. And we just started talking about history, and I threw up in the grass and I felt better. Sleep. And it was just like the next morning, I didn't even feel bad the next morning, because I'd never been drunk. So I think my body was able to like process it without getting a hangover.
Yeah.
I just decided, like, I just knew in that moment, rather, it wasn't so much a decision. I was like, I don't believe this anymore.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people will say that it's not something that like you decide on in a moment necessarily, but it's kind of something you realize. And sometimes you realize it earlier, and sometimes you realize it like after a really like slow, kind of slow boil. So it sounds like to me like it did happen fairly quickly for you. If we're gonna like rate it on some sort of scale, like rather than like over 15 or 20 years of struggling through questions, like you had a moment that kind of brought clarity, even though it sounded like it was maybe not that clear of a night. Brought some clarity to you, obviously. So then you're at that point, like, did you right away kind of pull back from your kind of church life? Was there any big changes in your life? Also, like, how did you get to here to where you're making content, talking about being an ex-Christian?
No, I did not stop going to church for a while, and I didn't like pull myself out. I didn't even tell people for a long time. I kind of struggled with it alone for a minute. And like, it took me months to even like allow myself to say ass or damn or oh bitch or whatever. Like, it took time. And even when I was saying all the words all the way up to like fuck, I couldn't say God damn for another like 6 months. I couldn't. There was something inside of me that just felt wrong. So yeah, it was definitely a slow process of like getting to the point of where I'm at now. And I had a new perspective though, like going in, and I think it was actually helpful that I went back to church with that perspective a few times, because I could see the tactics suddenly. All of a sudden, it wasn't like, oh, this is totally fine because they're doing it for the glory of God and for like the best thing that could ever happen to any of us. And then I was like, oh, they're doing this thing that's not true, and it's super manipulative, and look how it's for all the money, and look how fucking trapped everyone is. And maybe I shouldn't like make a judgment about, but that's how I viewed myself. Like, I was so trapped.
We're curious about your story, right? So if like that's how it was for you, like
true.
However it was, like whatever kind of language you want to put to it, that's how I can relate to that too. Just all of a sudden you feel like you have just kind of a new perspective on it, and you're looking back on it and looking back at the people that you were so close to just like weeks ago sometimes, and just like, how can you not see the manipulation, or how can you not see what's happening right now? So no, don't feel bad about saying that. It's understandable.
I appreciate that. Yeah, because that literally is like how I felt. Like it felt like a cage, and then it was a painful process of like detaching from all of that. And some of that too was done for me because like as I kind of separated myself from that, even before I told anybody I don't believe in this, you know, people can sense that. And Christians, the Christians that I've dealt with a lot of the time are pretty shallow, and you know, they could sense that I was pulling away. And
Well, you're
so
just not interacting as much, right? As soon as you kind of pull back from your enthusiasm, there's like,
yes.
I don't know, my experience, it was always like, oh, you know, I really felt like God wanted me to come talk to you, that maybe like there's something going on in your life right now, but it's just because I'm just not as enthusiastic as normal. Because there's a pressure to be enthusiastic. So
And I wonder too if, what did you just say? Like, God told me to come talk to me.
Yeah.
I wonder, like,
I always got that a lot, and I've always blamed it on the fact that like I have like a natural RBF, like a resting bitch face, and I got told so many times throughout my time in church. I had people, and I also have a chronic health condition that caused me to have pain. So I would have a lot of times where I'd be sitting kind of at the back of the service, and I would just be like, I just have a look on my face, and I don't know how many times I got told that God really laid it on their heart to come talk to me, and they could whatever. And it was always completely pointless, and something that was completely unrelated to what was going on. Either they were saying that there's some emotional thing going on when I'm like, no, I just don't feel like jumping around right now. Because like you said, charismatic church, they expect you to kind of get up there and get involved. And sometimes I was just like straight up, I was just in pain. So like I couldn't. But growing up in that kind of faith healing atmosphere, like if I did talk about my pain, I immediately would have people praying for me, which got really annoying after a while. So I would, you know, you kind of just like stuck in that position where you're like, well, no, I just want to exist here in the back. I'm still, you know, I still believe it all. I just don't want to participate in the same way. But there's only one way to do it right, and you have to get involved.
Yes,
So.
exactly. And there's so much of what has brought me here now too is like realizing how much Christianity, especially charismatic Christianity, forces people to not listen to themselves and forces people to not listen to their bodies specifically. And something that a trail that I've been on recently is like when you strip away everything, like the clothes, the money, you know, the personality, like what are you left with yourself? Maybe not personality, because that is kind of you, but like it's just you and your body, you know, until proven otherwise. That's all we've all got here. So why isn't that our like first thing to check in with, and like trusting that and working with that? And you know, that's sort of that was always a big part, which is why I talk a lot about trauma now too, because I recognized how much trauma was in my body.
Right.
And I've spent a lot of time working with like trauma coaches and therapists and going to sacred plant ceremonies to like try to help heal some of this. And so that's been a huge part of my deconstruction as well. So
I have a question to ask you about that. Before we move on with our interview portion here, I just wanted to remind people that we do still have a few lines open. So if you want to give us a call now, and you can talk to Chris or talk to myself, and if you have your own thoughts about deconstruction, or just maybe you want to relate to some of the stuff we're talking about, 512-991-9242 or tiny.cc/call TW. And yes, I just wanted to, I'm boiling hot because we are having a heat wave here in Canada. I know it's hard to believe, but so if you see myself adjusting, it's just because I am melting. But you had mentioned a little bit about your, maybe like there's not always a clear-cut path to like this place of agnosticism or atheism. Did you take any detours in your path? I know I did. So, and if you've listened for any time, you'll know that I thought I was an alien for a short time. But did you take any? Did you take any detours in your path out?
Yes, I definitely took some detours, and the main one was like just spirituality generally, spiritualism, and thinking that there was more going on, like having spirits or souls, and there being a spiritual world. But I became obsessed, just like with Christianity, becoming obsessed with the best Christian I could be. I became obsessed with like discovering this world and figuring out the truth of that. So I spent a lot of time, reading about weird woo-woo shit and kind of lost in those realms and like not fully like ascribing to one set of thinking, but sort of taking it all in and thinking that, yes, there was something else going on here. And, you know, if you've ever been there, it sort of is just a soup anyway. Like you sort of hear about numerology and angel numbers, and then you hear about light language, and you hear about twin flames and soul seeds and fucking, I don't know how much stuff, but it's all over the place. And I was all over the place.
Popular right now, right? And I think like in the polling, when they poll a lot of the people who don't consider themselves religious, they call themselves nuns, as in non-religious, not affiliated, not NUN. A lot of those people do fit into like that kind of spiritualism category. And I don't know if you would describe it like this, because I fell into that too. For me, it was just like the framework was so similar.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Replace faith healing for manifesting, or there's just a whole bunch of things that are very similar to my religious beliefs I had, or even just like the whole idea of like this purpose, this innate purpose that we have because there's some sort of creation, or like you're a light being, so you're here for a reason. There's just a whole bunch of this like very similar thought kind of process to it. And it's really easy if you kind of don't get involved with like, or if you don't take the time to, educate yourself on how to like think critically through these things, you can just kind of fall into another area that's no more truthful and doesn't have any more solid evidence for it as Christianity or any other religion. So I see that a lot. So I like to like bring that up because that seems to be a really compelling community. I don't know if it's community, it's pretty loosely tied, but seems to be a pretty like acceptable place to go after you're claimed to not be religious anymore. Just like
it really is. And it's because of like the whole personal truth thing, which I mean, I think that's a large part of it anyway. Maybe not the only thing, but it's like follow or take what works for you and leave the rest is sort of like the mantra of this space, where it's like, I'm going to say a bunch of things here, and whatever you don't like, you don't have to like, so you can just forget about it. Whatever you do like, go ahead and take that and apply it to yourself. But that really doesn't allow for that critical thinking piece where it's like, well, maybe this is striking me as something that I like because of some kind of indoctrination from the Christianity.
It feels familiar.
Exactly. So I'm like, oh, this is a safe place to be, so I can go into this. So yeah, it can take some time. I will say actually too, one thing that I appreciate about that space is the magic witch community, because I think that's more about women's empowerment and like feminism and equality than it is, and like fucking the patriarchy than it is about anything else. So I'm all about the witches for sure.
Yeah, and I've talked a lot about too, like that there's allyship that you can be made between like atheist agnostics and skeptics and other kind of less dogmatic types of groups. And I totally agree. I have said before, I wish witchcraft was true. It seems like so cool and all that stuff too. I wish I could make a little potion and make things happen. And also just aesthetically, it's just fucking cool. So anyway.
Yeah, it really is. Well, there's something about like ritual that I actually really like, and I still participate in ritual because and I don't think that there's anything spiritual happening there unless you define spiritual in a certain way. But I think that we have evolved to respond to rituals. Yeah. So yeah, I think that there's something there for sure. And I like the intentionality behind making a spell or making a potion. And I feel like it brings you into the present moment. Magic was actually a huge side trail for me too, not just spirituality, but I had a magic teacher for a while.
Oh, really?
I was a magic apprentice, yeah, and
that's awesome.
I know, it was a lot of fun actually.
Yeah.
I loved it, and I still love that magic teacher. And like, I don't really give a shit that magic's not real. And because, go ahead.
There's a whole. I would love to hear from somebody who actually identifies as like atheopagan as well, like people who have, because there is some people do not think that these two things can go together. But I have. I've read about it a little bit, and I would love to talk to somebody who like identifies as like an atheist and a pagan, because they basically do the rituals and things like that, but they don't have the supernatural beliefs in it. So that kind of sounds like it's like a happy medium for them. But well, yeah,
I don't ascribe. I don't have that label. I don't think of myself like that. But I definitely still am involved in rituals. I don't make potions or spells really, but I definitely like, I don't know if this will make sense without talking about it, but I definitely like work with fire. If that, I build a fire and I see myself in the fire. And really what ritual is for me is like a reflection, and it helps you get into that deeper space because of the repetitive nature of rituals and blah, 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 psychology. It doesn't matter. But basically,
no, but I get what you're saying. Like it's a form of kind of artistic expression, creativity, and you can use anything really to kind of do some introspection and like self-discovery in that way. The big difference is just having this like this attitude towards it, that there is like objective truth in the world, and we can we should have good methods for discovering it. Right. So it's like, you could have an appreciation for all sorts of things. I've also spoken how I still think crystals are really pretty. I just don't think that they can heal my body, but I still think they're really pretty. And I still sometimes buy them because they look really pretty and they reflect the light nicely in my bedroom. So, but it doesn't mean that I think they're going to do anything special for me. But anyway.
Yeah, true. Exactly. Yeah. I'm not going to be able to recharge my crystal in the moonlight and then put it in my water and expect like something to happen. But
there's just so much of that out there, right?
I know. But there is a certain, but again, even with that, even if somebody's doing that, like there is a certain intentionality that you're bringing in. You're paying attention to the natural cycles because here's the full moon. And I'm like intentionally putting this thing to like better my life. So if I'm thinking about what I'm putting into this, I'm thinking about that in my day-to-day life. It's not the fucking rock people. It's you. It's it's like you working with the rock and it's reflecting. That's my take on it anyway.
No, I totally agree. I think that it's good to have these things that we do for self-care, whether it's like, some sort of routine that you have. We talked lots on all of our programs about the scientifically proven benefits of things like meditation and mindfulness. And like, there's a reason why some of these traditions carry on and become really popular, even in non-religious spaces, because it's really beneficial. So, I mean, my first ritual today is drinking a coffee. So these things, like, you don't have to have a woo-woo factor or supernatural belief behind it, besides, having this kind of system in your life to, have self-reflection, have self-care and that sort of thing. So, exactly. Yeah, I think that's cool.
Well, if there are any atheopagans in the audience, we can definitely.
I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear how you're making that work and what kind of questions you get about it, because I know that there's a lot of conversations about it. So we do have a lot of calls on the line. I could keep talking. Okay. We could keep. Chris and I, we've talked about how we could just keep. We have so much to talk about, but we do have like a full list of callers that are waiting to talk to us, so we'll jump into those quickly here if you're ready.
I am ready. Let's do it.
Before we get into it, I do want to say that if you like what we do here, there are a few ways that you can support us. First is with our YouTube membership. I think we have there it is. You can become a member. Sometimes I forget what we're doing here. We're doing YouTube. If you can join there, you can have a monthly contribution to our channel, and you get little emojis to use and things like that. I think it's as like low as 99 cents. And then the next thing we do have is a donation button down below. We do have a fundraiser going for the ACA. All of the profits from that go straight to the ACA, the Atheist Community of Austin. We are all volunteers here. Chris is just my guest. We all do this in the love of our heart for the community. And so if you want to support us that way, but the best way probably to support us through our Patreon. Every single week here too, if you're a Patreon or if you're a patron, we do take time to shout out somebody. So we're going to take some time now to thank our patron of the week. And this week, our special patron is Jonathan Hull. Thank you so much for supporting us on Patreon. And if anyone else in the audience is interested in supporting us that way, the link is on the screen, or you can go to tiny.cc/Patreon TW. So
great job, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah.
That's one of the most direct ways you can help us keep the show going, and we can keep introducing you to great new content creators like Chris here. So are you ready to get into some calls?
Oh yeah.
All right, let's head in here. Well, because we were talking about it, I think we have to bring on Kennita first. Kennita is calling from California, and she calls herself an atheopagan. So, Kennita, how are you? It's nice to talk to you again.
Hello. Yes, thank you for having me on. So, right, I've thought of myself as an atheopagan for quite a while, and I think it's exciting that it's actually becoming a thing.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more about it. Like, what signifies you as like an atheopagan? How does that look different?
Yeah, how did you blend paganism and atheism? Yeah.
Well, I started out. My mother was an Ayn Rand objectivist, so I didn't even grow up with any much religious stuff going on because my mom was pretty feisty and she made the Southern Baptist relatives mostly keep it away from me. So, but when I reached puberty, well, a lot of people go kind of crazy then, and I was looking for answers, and there didn't seem to be any. So I happened to live within a couple of miles of Case Western Reserve University, which had some intelligent Catholics in it, and they were very pleasant people. And so since they had some answers, I glommed onto them for a while. And since I went to an all-girls school, I wasn't dealing with, a lot of the sexual tension stuff that usually goes around puberty, so that wasn't a problem. But then I went off to MIT, and that was like 96 at least % male. And so I discovered the men and quickly determined that, the Catholics are all about feeling guilty, and I'm not into feeling guilty about things that I don't think were wrong. So I pretty much had to dump Catholicism at that point, right? I guess I didn't have it in my bones like people who were born into it, but I had been.
I was just gonna say that sounds to me like you actually were listening to yourself and like kind of going based on how you were. Like you took your own experience into account, which is something that not everybody does, especially if they were indoctrinated to have shame around those experiences.
Yes.
So that's good for you.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Right.
So,
and the thing is that as, I was saying to myself, wait a minute, Catholic isn't going to really work, but I still wanted the answers. And so I was casting about. I ended up in moral rearmament for a while, right? There were a number of different things. And then I moved out to California, and the first person that I met when I got there happened to be the national coordinator for the Pagan Occult and Witchcraft Special Interest Group of Mensa.
Whoa.
Wow.
So
just on the street.
So I come up with,
just got into California.
Extremely intelligent.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, that got lost.
That's okay.
Yeah, no, keep going.
Okay, you can go ahead.
Yes, then I come into contact with some extremely intelligent pagans. And so I, since I'm still looking for answers, I said, aha, here's a spirituality that I can actually get with because, well, nature spirituality made more sense anyway. At least they're dealing with, the elements of the earth and the way that the planets go around. And, you can imagine the fiery part of yourself and the airy part of yourself and your emotional, watery part and those things. So I said, okay, I can deal with this. But as I went along, I had to say to myself, well, but you don't really believe this stuff, right? And it's like, well, no, I don't. But
that was my next question for you, is that when you get all these things that you can use it as a framework for like kind of assessing things. I was wondering that, did you ever fall into the belief that this was actually true and that you actually had some kind of control over these elements, or that you had like, so that sounds to me like you kind of always stayed skeptical even throughout that, and you've maintained that.
Well, I was trying to see whether there really was anything to it, right? And I just found that, no, I can't really say that, well, it may look like I'm moving these things, but really they were going to move anyway. Or, this heat that I'm feeling, that's internally generated. I'm not getting this from anybody. And
the heat thing's interesting. That heat thing is used in so many other practices as well. That's also something that they use in faith healing too, to get you to and you can do, anybody can do this as an experiment. You can do it in any kind of like meditation type thing too, where you focus on certain areas, and you can actually and I think there's something going on physiologically perhaps, but you can actually get like a tingling sensation or like a warm sensation in your body. But all of this is like it's nothing that's unique or individual to certain types of, it's just something that anybody can do in any kind of a setting, but it's something that a lot of people use as like verifiable kind of evidence that something is happening. But then you go on after that, and depending on what you're using the heating or the tingling sensation for, you realize that like nothing changed as far as like empirical kind of evidence for maybe my health or something like that. Like you can cause a warm sensation in your body, but it's not necessarily going to like heal a broken bone or a joint or like eczema or something like that, like whatever they use it for, right? But it does give you a psychological boost when it's happening.
Right.
This makes me wonder actually if because in trauma work there is like an understanding that you can have a physiological response / release through sensation and emotion when moving through stuck trauma. And so that makes me wonder, like, is there something to focusing on your body and having there be something like the warmth coming up? Like, is something actually changing? I would like to know, but that would be more of a physiological, more about like me paying attention to myself rather than like the magic is working.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there probably is something that is beyond us, Chris. Oh, sorry, Kennita. I was going to say there's probably is something going on in the neurological kind of like aspect, and a lot of like trauma counseling and trauma therapy and EDMR or EMDR, I always forget, has to do with your brain and your the networks going on there. So like it seems like there's probably an explanation that I couldn't spit out right now because I don't have the education for it, but there's probably something there that can cause a bit of a at least an improvement in how you're feeling at the moment. And when you're dealing with somebody with doing like trauma work, it probably is something that can carry on forward. But
yeah, EDMR sounds like a new kind of really cool thing, though.
So Kennita, I just want to know what's
cool about it is that while something is going on, it's not something supernatural. That's what I finally came to. It's like anybody who thinks that something is supernatural is just underestimating what awesome things the natural can do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because our bodies, well, they evolved to do some pretty incredible things over the past few billion years or a few hundred million, right?
Yep.
And so, and it's because, and they actually pay homage to that every now and then when they're doing things like, physical therapy, and they say, concentrate on this, and your brain is actually doing most of the work. It's not the gods, even though the gods are really fun to think about. I mean, if you're trying to bring forth thoughts of, powerful power and so on, think about Thor. And if you're trying to think about, your mother, then, the Mari and so on. You can use these images, even though they're perfectly natural things. You can
So that sounds,
imagine.
so Kennita, I'm actually
going
curious to know that what you're describing now sounds a lot like archetypal work to me. Like if you can't see yourself in a certain way and you don't have confidence, you're trying to do something in your life, you can often work with archetypes like that to like help you feel more courageous, help you feel more confident, because you can see those qualities in another, you know, another being, another entity or person, and then like try to adapt those things to yourself. So it sounds like you've been on like this journey of moving through these different thoughts and spiritualities and religions, and it sounds like you're not so much an atheopagan now. So I'm wondering where you are with it.
Well, no, I mean, because an atheopagan is someone who uses all of the pagan archetypes.
Okay.
Do their own internal spiritual work.
Okay,
so it's I still go
like a framework,
I still
right?
go
It's a framework
to pagan ritual.
Yeah.
Ritual. Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. Like ritual is still so powerful, and archetypes even. Like, yeah, I've seen this work in my own life, which obviously is anecdotal, but this is the kind of thing that I think is different from like major religion. This is like the thing when people are talking about, but it's my truth. Like you can do so much on your own about yourself and only with yourself that doesn't need to include other people doing rituals and other people doing archetypal work, because like maybe ritual only really works for me that well because I was preloaded with all of the ritualistic aspects of religion. So yeah, I do appreciate that take on paganism, that it is more of an archetypal internal spiritual process.
Right. And you're not taking you're not taking your like internal work and saying like this is the absolute truth, and because I pray to Freya, or that I find Freya as a very like a inspirational archetype and I really enjoy having these rituals, that's what you have to do. Or maybe take it a step further and saying that that's how we need to like make our laws now. So I think that's taking it way too far.
And my I have friends who actually believe that these, gods and goddesses exist out there. And I feel that, they're not hurting anybody or trying to make anybody believe anything in particular about all these gods and goddesses. So, and it's fine if they believe that. I guess I would want to make sure that I stayed mentally aloof from it enough that if it came time to do something important, that I wasn't counting on the gods to do it, right? But have it like when, it's just like the Christians say, oh, thoughts and prayers, right? Then the pagans will say, oh, would you light a candle for me? And it's like, well, that's all wonderful, but take your antibiotics, right?
Yeah, exactly. So. I can appreciate that. Kennita, thank you for calling in tonight. It's nice to hear from you again. It's good to talk to somebody who has some experience, who identifies with the atheopagan title or label, I guess, if you will. I'm gonna let you go because we do have a lot of other calls actually just dying to talk to us tonight. So thank you so much for calling in, and we'll hope to talk to you again soon.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, take care.
Erin, I know we're about to do the promo, Erin, but I have a quick thought that I wanted to get in before that. Thinking about like at the end there, I think the one place where me and Kennita sort of diverge is in thinking that it is okay for people to just believe in that kind of thing. Like, you hear that so much, like, well, if that person's not hurting anybody else with their belief, then it doesn't matter. Like, let them do what they want. And like, obviously I believe in free speech and like the ability to practice whatever religion you want, and I will fight for that religion, for that right for everybody. That's not what I'm saying here. Like, but something that I've been working with a lot is like I mentioned earlier, the heuristics of like believing something. So, and I'm sure if people listen to these shows, they've heard people talk about this, but like if you do believe in something that isn't true, at some point you've taken a step to convince yourself of that, or you have been convinced by that without actually questioning it critically. and that can affect other areas of your life,
Exactly. Yeah.
like voting and like interacting with other people and like the communities that you build. So I think that it can have negative effects. I would never try to police that with a person, like fucking whatever, if you believe in Freya, but that is something that I think
I like the
I would
name.
ask people yeah, somebody please.
No, I think that you make a really good point, and I want to say that I also like agree with you, and that's kind of like the aim of our program here, and a lot of our shows that we have, we focus on the epistemology, so the knowledge here, and so when you come to your beliefs, we want to talk about like how you got there, because getting to certain beliefs, although they may not be harmful on a wider aspect, and they may only affect you personally, or so you think, it does affect your larger behavior in your community and the way that you're contributing and the way you vote and those kind of things. So it's important to hold true beliefs. We often say around here we want to hold as many true beliefs as possible and as few false beliefs. So it's really important to have at least have looked at what you believe and why you believe it, and to know that you have a good methodology for coming to truth. So
yeah,
and exactly. Yes, like you said, Chris, I am going to run to our promo next. If you haven't been aware, Truth Wanted is part of a larger affiliation with the atheist community of Austin, and we do have a lot of other programs. So if you have missed on any of those this week, we're going to show you what you missed out on.
Maybe I'll use that phrase a lot, but it's important to stress you're normal. Whatever it is, no matter how it hangs or dangles or smells or whatever else, it's normal, it's beautiful.
He goes to heaven and he gets to live forever, whereas Anne Frank, who never came to understand Christ as her Lord and personal Savior, burns forever in a fire. Is that perfect justice? Because if it is, perfect justice can go itself.
Feel free to give me some praise hands, ladies. For whatsoever thy soul lusteth after, for sheep or wine, or for strong drink, thou shalt eat there before the Lord thy God. So there you have it, folks.
Amen.
The Bible says grab some beers.
Atheists go to outer darkness. It's a place worse than hell.
Frank, why on earth should anybody believe that this is a real place?
Kenneth, you're going to go to Valhalla when you die.
I'd like to go to Cancun or something.
It'd be way cooler.
But really, very polite, well-groomed people are gathering in temples as we speak with all of their kids, and they believe that Joseph Smith was a prophet. What happens if you get to heaven and heaven is full of Mormons?
All right, we're going to jump into our next call here. So we did put a poll question out today, and it's one I don't think I gave Chris any time ahead of time to look into the story, but we polled the audience about whether they believe the Loch Ness monster was real, and that is coming off of an article that there was, and I'm going to get the name of the dinosaur wrong, but there was a type of sea living dinosaur that was found in freshwater, or the fossils were found in it anyway. So it gave some plausibility to the Loch Ness monster being real, apparently. So
I'm into
it. I would like to talk to Phil from Texas, who is responding to our poll question. Hi, Phil.
Hey, Phil.
Hi, Erin.
Hi.
Hi, Chris. I'm so happy to see young people breaking the mold. You guys are just the best.
Yay!
I got into skepticism a long time ago, and it still astonishes me what people are willing to believe. They'll believe any story as long as it's shouted out with confidence and surety. They'll fucking believe anything. You name it, they'll believe it. But one of the points I wanted to make was that it is possible to do the best skeptical work and still be wrong. Because we have been told things all our life that as skeptics we were convinced were right that are not right. Can I give you a brief example?
Yeah, sure. Definitely.
Okay. I'm a sci-fi movie buff. I'm an old guy, so I grew up on 50s reruns on TV and Outer Limits and Twilight Zone and all those great shows.
Outer Limits.
For decades, we were told. Now, this is a silly example, but follow me here. this is a silly example, but for decades we were told that there were two different endings to King Kong versus Godzilla. There was a Japanese ending and an American ending, one in which Godzilla won, the other one in which King Kong won. You don't even know that, right?
No, I'm vaguely familiar with what you're talking about. Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so 1963, Godzilla versus King Kong. It turns out somebody just said that. It wasn't true at all. There's not two different endings. You know, and for decades, all of us sci-fi fans believed that. So it's possible to do the hard work and still get it all wrong.
I guess my question about that, Phil, really quick, Phil, I guess my question before you say your next thing is, were you doing the hard work actually? Were you actually like, is it true that this was filmed two different ways? And how can I find that out? And am I going to write a letter to the person? And, you know, just because you're skeptically looking at other things in your life doesn't mean you are at other, you know, like the Godzilla. Yeah, what was the other monster? King Kong.
King Kong.
Yeah, the Godzilla King Kong movie. So were you actually like taking the time to be like, is this true? And can I find the other thing? Or was it just like a popular belief, so it was just okay to believe it?
Both of the above. Both of the above, because nobody challenged that claim for decades. So we all kind of went like, well, somebody said it, so it must be true.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like then until the decades passed, nobody was actually like, in your words, doing the hard work that goes into like being a skeptic.
There was a misstep somewhere along the line that, you know, the people further down didn't catch. I think that's a really good point that you're making, both of you, is that like, you know, we could come to this area, or we could come to this framework where we're like, okay, we're skeptics and like we try to have good methodology, but how often are we like getting lazy with it, I guess maybe is the right way to look at it. Or like just,
you remember,
I trust a certain people. I trust a certain like person, so I'm going to follow them. But then you're forgetting that maybe to like go back and actually do the source checking and things like that too. I have caught myself doing that, especially this last like couple of years when there's been so much out there. You kind of get those, you know, that's what influencers are. They're people who condense information and they put it out to you. And then once you kind of trust an influencer, you can kind of just trust that they did the source checking. But sometimes it's important to like really go back and do it, especially on, I mean, maybe the King Kong thing is not like a life-changing thing. I wouldn't necessarily say that you did anything wrong there by missing that. But like when it comes to bigger things, like to actually like go back and realize that like even somebody that you really trust might not have it right. So always going back and keeping yourself and, you know, other people in the skeptic community accountable for doing the hard work.
Yeah.
Exactly. Do both of you remember subliminal cuts in films? Do you know what that's about?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay. There's no such goddamn thing as subliminal cuts. That was never done. And eventually the guy, and this got a congressional hearing. You know, they outlawed subliminal cuts, even though there were no such thing. And eventually the guy who promoted that theory admitted that he made it up. You remember in The Exorcist, supposedly there were subliminal cuts showing quick cuts of popcorn and cold drinks and so on, and that made the concessions go up. That never happened. That didn't happen. But yet, I think there are still millions of people who believe that subliminal cuts are a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is true that subliminal cuts are real, but I think, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, I think where that comes from is like art house films and like porn, like, you know, like really weird, like porn and art house things that people would go and see. And it was like really interesting, like artistic ways of messing with film. So it's like when they were like, okay, we're going to cut this little piece of film here and tape it in so that this flashes and that's going to be really artistic. But I think maybe the case you're talking about, was it about like popular films? Like,
yeah, I think the idea is that like maybe if it was happening in an artistic side, you know, side thing, is that somebody took that idea and they use it to apply to like larger media. And it,
right.
I mean, we're just kind of, we're drawing back to like the whole like satanic panic, honestly, where it was just like any excuse to kind of like make everybody really paranoid about everything. And sometimes there is like a hint of, a hint of, I mean, what do they say? Like the best conspiracies have a hint of truth in them. So, and yeah, just like kind of missing the step there of like seeing like where to start from.
All right. Hold on.
Yeah.
Here's one more. For 100 years, we were told that spinach had 10 times the iron that it actually contains.
Right.
And it turns out, and for years, people said that was a misplaced decimal point. And it turns out later, no, it wasn't a misplaced decimal point. It was a corrupted experiment. So it's possible to do the best work you can do and still be wrong.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
So I mean, maybe another message here is that like, even if you're a skeptic, is that you need to always remain humble and that things may change.
Yeah, I think Phil, my understanding of what you're saying is like, even if you have the skeptic label, like you can still get it wrong. So we need to continue being skeptical, and we need to continue being, skeptical. I don't know if there's another word. We need to continue the practice. Just because you've gone through it once with something doesn't mean that thing can't be skepticized again, or that you should stop doing it for other things. That's kind of what I'm getting from what you're saying, Phil.
Remain in that epistemic humility, right? That you may still have it wrong, and people that you respect may have it wrong still. So just like, just remain open in that way. And I mean, we try to say on like all these shows, like we're open to being convinced, and if somebody calls in and talks to us and wants to like talk to us about God, like I have never said there's nothing that will ever convince me, because I'm trying to remain, epistemically humble, that I don't know everything. I'm not omniscient. So there may be something out there that like will change my mind, and there may be views that I hold right now, or like things that I would consider knowledge right now that I could be wrong about. So but that's just like different frameworks we work in.
The magic of science is we're always able to change our minds when we get more information. Do you remember this has been going on for 60 years, that if you train a planaria, a flatworm, to move toward food when you shine a certain light, and you chop that planaria up and you feed it to another planaria, that worm will absorb the knowledge from the first worm. Remember that experiment?
I've never heard of that one. I'm sorry, but that sounds super trippy.
Worm knowledge experiment. Whoa.
Worm knowledge.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm guessing it had something to do with like mazes, right? Like it could still go through like the same route or something.
And there are conflicting results on that particular experiment. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So all I'm saying is we always need to keep an open mind, but not believe every goddamn thing that some crackpot, produces a video about.
That's
especially when it comes to worms.
Yeah.
Those goddamn worms.
Yeah. So to relate it to like the Loch Ness monster thing, I like this, it's an interesting headline. It's a little clickbaity, it's maybe like, but to people who are kind of in that realm of kind of like cryptids and, these woo-woo things, like that's going to be a lot of like juice for somebody to like run with it. Right. It took me once less than 30 seconds to go and look at the deeper research in it and realize that like the fossil's still like 100 million years old. So it's like, if you're talking about, modern day sightings, like it still sounds pretty implausible to me. So for me, I could, anyway, it just, I'm picking up what you're putting down, Phil, and I appreciate the reminder.
Yeah.
Well, once somebody sees a Mothman or a Cougar Man or a this or that man, suddenly we have hundreds of reports, because once the story breaks, everybody starts seeing it.
Yeah. Carl Sagan talks a lot about that in his book, A Demon Haunted World. So,
a must read for everybody.
I love that book.
Yeah.
That book gave me a lot of clarity on a lot of things, especially coming from like this, like the charismatic kind of movements. Like,
yes.
It just was like, it broke it down quite simply, on how we can kind of take these, he's got so many simple ways of looking at these things so that you can quickly, assess these claims that people are making. And also just like it kind of sparked my interest into learning a little bit more about psychology and like how these things, like I'm no expert, I just read for fun, but
Same.
understanding a little bit more on like what happens in, you know, how people come to these beliefs and how it works, you know, in conditioning and social contagion and all these other things. Like it's also very interesting, right? Yeah.
500 years ago, everybody you would stop on the street would insist that they had seen a witch having sex with the devil or poisoning a well. It was common knowledge. Everybody knew it. And we now know it was completely wrong. And tens of thousands of people were tortured to death, died horrible deaths. But it was common knowledge that these things happened all the time.
Yes.
So same thing with alien abductions, I think, and you know, you name it. You name a crazy belief, and it's probably bullshit.
Yeah, definitely.
Probably. Yeah. Good reminder. Thanks for calling in, Phil. I think you brought up some great points. Yeah. Have a great rest of your night. Or whatever time zone everybody is in.
Wherever you are. I have a small confession, a live confession with Chris and Erin.
Okay.
I fucking love cryptids.
Yeah. I mean, we all kind of do too. That's why, like, we talk about them a lot on the show too. Like, we've all.
You're right. But I'll spend time like watching the shows, hoping they find Bigfoot. Actually, one of the best shows I've ever seen about cryptids is called Hellier, and you don't need to believe it, but just watch it.
Is it good? I haven't watched it.
It's a wild time.
What's it called? Hellier?
Hellier, yeah. So it's like hell, I-E-R.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I also find that stuff fascinating. I like to, like, just really kind of, I mean, now I think it's more of just like silly kind of escapism stuff. But like, there was a time where, I mean, I've kind of said this before too, that like when I had my religious beliefs, I actually sort of felt like pretty like unsure. Like these things were more like documentaries to me about like what's the devil doing to trick us now. So like all these things seemed really plausible for a long time for me. So I don't know. I still find it really interesting. I'm like, it'd be like sweet if somebody could like prove that mermads are real. Like I love mermaids.
Do you remember that mermaid documentary? I was
hell yeah, I do.
Oh
yeah, I do.
I was like, this is real. Yep.
Yep. That's so funny. We'll have to put that on one of our shirts. I mean, mermaids should be real.
Mermaids should be.
Speaking of that, I'll take a moment right now to shout out our merch store. Another way if you want to support the show is we have merch, and I have been not shy about talking about how my Truth Wanda shirt is my favorite shirt, and I'm not just being a dork and trying to promote my own show. And we have a special limited edition monthly logo design each month right now. And so go onto the website, check that out, tiny.cc/merch-ACA. And I am pretty excited about some of the ones that we came up for over the next couple of months. So keep your eye on that, because it's going to be great. Let's jump into another call here, because we are getting close to the end of the program and we still have like so many callers. But let's talk to Jasmine. Jasmine is a fellow Canadian, and she wants to talk about faith healing and religious practices. Wants to know if we have kept any of, or I'll let you tell us, Jasmine.
Well, yeah. Basically, I just wanted to know, especially from people who come out of the very heavily charismatic religions, that don't you miss that after each of you converted?
Not at all.
Yes and no for me.
Probably based on our experiences, it would depend. Don't I miss it? No, I don't miss it even the slightest, because I mean, this is going to be just based very, very subjectively on my own experience. I had a health condition, and that the faith healing stuff was used against me constantly. And it became such an annoying part of my life, being prayed over, and such a source of shame for me, because of the idea that if you're not getting healed, that there's something that in your own heart of why you're not being healed. I've shared before that one time I was accused of having a demon, because I had this health condition. So it really messed with my head, and I moved away from the charismatic movements, like charismatic denomination in my 20s. And so I actually got away from that. And I think that's one of the only reasons I stayed in Christianity longer, was because I found a church that didn't do that, because I recognized early on, even though I didn't assess my own, like my faith system, I recognized early on that faith healing was absolutely like an abusive practice. So I don't miss it, not even in a little bit. Although I have said I do wish witchcraft was true, but I see those things as very different, because that's something that I would be doing like just for fun on my own. But I'll let you answer, Chris. You said a little bit yes and no.
Yeah, and actually, as you were talking, maybe I'm changing my answer to just completely no, because the reason I said yes as well as no for all the reasons you said. Yes, my original answer was yes, was because I thought I was missing like the connection that's happening, like being in a group of people who are all focusing on the same objective. Like there's something emotionally like nice about that. I don't know if nice is quite the right word, but there's like it's the community thing. But then as I was thinking about it, I was like, you know what? But I get that from like volunteering, cleaning up the river. And I get that from being on set, filming a commercial. We all are focused on the same thing, working towards a goal. And that gives me that feeling. So no, I don't miss that at all, because like Erin said, that was a super traumatic place for me to be, and a really abusive place as well.
Yeah. How do you feel about it, Jasmine? Do you currently hold that belief, or are you a Christian, or where are you at with this?
Well, I guess you would call me a best loose theist, maybe a deist. But
okay.
How would do you both believe faith healing has no place? And if it doesn't, why not? And if it does, how can we adapt it for atheists?
I believe that it has no place in medical treatment at all.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna draw a pretty hard line in the sand there. I think there's no evidence, absolutely none, that it does anything. And in fact, there's been studies shown that prayer and things like faith healing can have a detrimental effect on someone's on the outcome of recovery from something like that. So I think that there's no place for it. If you want to talk about how we can build like community, and like I think that if I were to talk about anything that maybe is lacking in maybe the secular community is like how people would maybe gather around somebody who is having like a health issue. I think that it's much more beneficial to bring someone a casserole than it is to go pray for them.
I agree. I would say no, there is no place for it. I say no, there is no place for it. And I think the place where we can take it for atheists and everybody is psychedelic therapeutics and placebo effect. Like there's already so much that our brain can do on its own without needing to pray. We just need the research behind it and the evidence. And we already have some of that building up in the psychedelic world, as well as, the placebo effect. Like right. people are healing themselves with just a little sugar pill. So it's like,
there's empirical evidence to show that kind of thing, right? Like I know that. So I've had several different kind of surgeries, and like one of the first things they tell me to do is get up and start walking around, because when you start working towards this healing process, when you're psychologically there, you actually do get better faster. So, I think that if we were to pour more research and work on that, I think there's lots of progress that can be made if we want to, have some more control over our health, I guess, because I think that that's kind of ultimately what the goal is in faith healing. Is it's when you're sick, or if you have something like that, it's a shitty situation. You're out of control, and you'd like to gain some control over it. So I think that looking into other ways like that are not externally based necessarily, like where you're asking for some arbitrary thing to happen, to fix it, where we're looking more about like what are some actual pragmatic ways that we can go ahead and increase healing or that kind of thing. And there are a lot of options outside of just like straight therapeutic things like, like painkillers. There are things that have been shown to work in different kind of pain studies and that sort of thing. But yeah. What do you think, Jasmine? I feel like we both just went bleh on you.
I work with a lot of older people, and they tend to be heavily religious, and they're not gonna change their worldviews, whatever, anytime soon. Am I doing a disservice if I engage them in their faith practices?
Like if you were to let somebody pray for you, is that what you mean? Or just like indulging them while they talk about it? So,
they want me, yeah, more indulging them while they talk about it. I mean, I'm not very versed on the Bible, but if they want to talk about the Bible, just, I don't know, go into Psalms or something.
I think that that's up to you, Jasmine. I don't think it's doing a service or a disservice. It's literally just what you would like to do with your relationship with them and what they want to do. Like, people are going to believe what they believe. And if you would like to enter in a dialogue with someone, then you can ask them if they want to do the same and go from there and just share your thoughts. Whereas it's not up to you whether or not them talking about what they believe and you just letting them talk about it is a disservice. I think that's putting too much power in your hands over their scenario. Like, because that sort of implies that it would be a service because you would help them get out of their belief, and that's not your responsibility. You're there being their friend, being in their community. So I think that that's sort of the wrong question, I guess, is what I think.
I think I largely agree with you, Chris. I say with the only caveat that I would put in there was that when you see somebody who is maybe actively harming themselves, so we know that there are beliefs that are widely held that are a religious belief where somebody is going to maybe neglect proper treatment. I think that is a situation where you may want to like step in and maybe question somebody based on what they're doing. But I mean, these are relational issues, so there's never going to be a yes or no, black or white answer to it. So it's always going to be up to your discretion. And like Chris said, just like kind of where you're wanting to go with that and what is the goal in that relationship. If it's somebody that you are really close with, that you feel like you can have an open conversation with, that they're not just going to, get defensive and turn away, and you see them doing active harm towards themselves or someone that they are in care of, I think that is a time where you might want to step in. If it is somebody who is, if you have an older generation, or and it's just more of just like this personal practice that they have, and it gives them some hope, meaning, and purpose. Like I know other people have different opinions on this. I would just kind of let it be personally, but ultimately you're always going to have nuance, and it's going to have something that you have to kind of work through on your own. But maybe just a few caveats, like I said.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Jasmine?
The last question I have. Well, yeah, I can see your point. I can certainly see your point. The last question I have is, given that, again, that you guys came from very charismatic, experiential kind of religious backgrounds, what do you replace those experiential, transcendent needs, I guess, maybe you guys might have, if you have?
Sorry.
Well,
I
think I understood the question. Yeah. What have I replaced my experiential, like the charismatic emotional side of church experiences? So I mentioned earlier that I'm still involved with like ritual, and that is part of how I have stayed involved with that kind of experiential thing. But I also think that once I got out of the mindset of thinking that there was another world outside of our own, like a spiritual world or some dimension that is existing that we should be able to access or something. Once I stopped thinking that and started just viewing the world that we are in with our bodies as the experience that we're having that I should focus on, suddenly like being with my friends or being with my partner or just watching a TV show, like I started to feel that way about a lot of things. Not all the time. Life is still complex and hard and whatever, but like those things were able to come in. The experiential, like emotional, whatever, was able to come in more easily. And like dancing at a wedding. Like I'm thinking of when I consumed some things and was dancing at a wedding. And I had one of those moments just feeling like this feels so unreal right now and so amazing. And it was even more than anything church could ever give me, because there was still something I could never access with Christianity. I could never access God except through what I was experiencing. So I always felt like, since I couldn't confirm it one way or another, there was always a missing piece there. And even though those times were super emotionally high and even like something that you might miss, I have gained more benefit and more value from not believing that there's something else happening and just believing that this is it. And I am fully experiencing this event right now. I am fully experiencing my life because it is mine. It's my body and it's my experience. Nobody else is. Weird hive mind solipsism brain. But that's my take on it.
Yeah. I'm very similar to like what you were talking about. I definitely felt like, well, I'll just say when I first left Christianity, I relied heavily on meditation because I think that for me, it was like part of my routine or ritual, if we're going to go with that kind of that framework for today. I don't know how many times I said framework today. I spent a lot of time doing meditation, doing mindfulness. I would do guided meditation often because I felt like I really needed someone to lead me, almost like how like I relied on my pastor to lead me in church. I did a lot of guided meditation, and then I did a lot of other kind of mindful stuff like that. I did that a lot, and I think that did get me through a lot of like, there's like this detox period that I had where I like when you realize that like there's nobody listening on the other side, or when you come to that that belief, there's a bit of a withdrawal almost. And so I find that meditation is a really great kind of replacement for that. And I mean, like Chris had touched on, like music is like incredibly powerful. I spend a lot of time listening to music and just really like embrace, like just really getting into the whole thing. Like I used to be a bass player. I used to be on the worship team. I love nothing more than like cranking up my music and like lying on the floor and just like feeling the vibrations in my body and just really soaking it all in. Right. Before COVID, going to concerts, like one of my huge experiences coming out of Christianity was going to one of my favorite bands and just having like a completely like unreal experience there, and realizing that like that had nothing to do with Christianity, that had nothing to do with God. And it also came with this perk of having like no shame because I was just like enjoying myself with music. So I think there are a lot of things that we can call replacement, but really it's just like normal human stuff. And it's just like things that all humans should like maybe just find, what part of their self-care and what they do to like feel good. It's these serotonin things and dopamine uppers, like these things all just work as a part of like your ongoing, your daily routines. So once you kind of move farther away from it, it becomes less of like, oh, I'm trying to replace this old routine I had, and just more of like, oh, this is just part of living. You just like go for a walk in nature and you're just there. And I mean, I know I'm just going to assume that Chris gets this too. When you kind of go through some of the work too, like, and you're able to just be there, and you understand more about just soaking in the experience. It's a healing process in itself. We don't need faith healing. You just go for a walk in the woods and just enjoy it. Like this stuff is really overlooked as far as like living, I guess. I don't know.
Fuck yeah, I agree.
Yeah, go for a walk. Witchcraft is cool, and go for a walk if you can. So I don't know.
Same thing they've always been telling you: get outside
safely.
Yeah,
I'm always like all these caveats.
Yeah. So we're not. Yeah.
How do you feel about that, Jasmine?
Well, that's definitely a good way to look at it. I think if you're definitely coming from like the atheistic perspective, yes.
Yeah.
That's all my questions. I enjoyed the show. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
Thanks, Jasmine.
Yeah, thank you so much for calling in. And I mean, I appreciate these kind of topics too. I think a lot of like what we talk about, myself personally, what I talk about a lot is like kind of like this moving forward after deconstruction or deconversion. I don't care what word you use, because a lot of what it entails is like this reconstruction of your life. And so some people, they'll reconstruct over to a different type of denomination or different version of faith of some sort. But regardless, especially I think if you're raised in like Western evangelical, there's a lot of like this kind of stunting of your emotional and stunting of your self-identity. So there's a lot of reconstruction that has to happen just getting to know yourself again, and like understanding how you actually feel about things. Like, what are your likes and dislikes? Like, it goes down to such a basal level that you need to go and rework on, because I don't know. It's just, that's been an experience that I've heard over and over again, that there's just so much of this like self-discovery. So
and that's what I talk a lot about on my channel too, is because that reconstruction period, there are resources, but it's ultimately up to you to make the decisions where you want to go. And that can be really scary and really overwhelming when you used to have something or someone to rely on. So I totally get it.
Yeah. And then dealing with things like lack of community or loss of community. We don't have much time on the show left, so I'm just going to give a few little shout outs here. Like, if you find yourself on the other side of Christianity and you don't have a community, that's what we do here at the Atheist Community of Austin, and we try to create some space for that. There are different fan run things like the Discord. We have tiny.cc/ACD Discord. This is just a great place to kind of chat and hang out with people. And there's a lot of like kind of behind the scenes stuff too. Lots of us ACA hosts pop in there to chat with people. There is also the Facebook group. These are just different avenues for people to kind of, as we would have said back at church, plug in. These are areas for you to plug in and meet people. You can meet people in your area and that sort of thing too. tiny.cc/FBTWG. That's another fan run group. Just more places for you to hang out. If you like listening to this kind of content, but you prefer an audio version, we do have a hub for all of that at tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. So that has all of the Atheist Community of Austin shows that we have, all in audio form. So if you are one of those people that works long days and you like to just listen to something on your earbuds, that's the one-stop place for all that stuff. And then lastly, if you want to get in touch with us at the show, you can always email us at truth@atheist-community.org. We try to get back to people. We want to create community. We want to get back for people, and we want to hear your responses too, things you like or dislike about the show. Before we say thanks to the other people behind the scenes here, Chris, do you have any kind of last minute things you'd like to share with everybody? Like, what would you kind of what kind of advice would you give to somebody who's kind of just finding themselves on the other side of faith and where to go from here?
I would encourage anybody who finds themselves like just on that other side of the threshold, like I talked about earlier, like suddenly things are not making sense, is to first and foremost be gentle with yourself, be super compassionate with yourself. Like, you have been indoctrinated, you've been told things, you've believed things for a long time, you have a certain pattern of thinking and a pattern of being, and that took time to get to wherever you are now. However old you are, that's how many years it took to get that. And then it's going to take time to break that down and to reconstruct a new thing. And it can feel like it's a really frustrating, and because it is, it can feel like a very frustrating path, especially when you don't have the answer immediately. So for a long time, I struggled with, why isn't this all just changed now? I just want to be out of this now.
Yeah.
But that's just not the way.
It's not just like a light switch, right? You can't
exactly.
Just flick a switch and then you're like, okay, now I'm over here. There's a lot of work to do, right?
Yes. And it can feel so like demoralizing and feel so hurtful, because you're like, damn, dude, I didn't ask for any of this. Like, why do I now have to do all the work to get out of it? If you need a day or two of being in that, do it. Take your time to grieve, because you need to grieve. That is a big part of this process for most people, I think, is grieving the childhood you lost, grieving the trauma that you had to endure, and then also working on the healing of that process. Because just being with yourself, just be with yourself.
Yeah.
And be with that. Exactly. Be patient, be with that process, and take the wins as they come. All it is one small step at a time. Yeah. And eventually your life is going to look different. It already does. Like, as soon as you have the realization, it's like taking a flashlight in a dark room, all of the shadows change, even though the whole room isn't lit up, but everything's shifting inside of you right now. And that can be uncomfortable. That can be scary, but just keep going because it's going to be all right.
Awesome. Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much for that. Chris,
Yeah.
For anybody who would like to see more of your content, and I do think that anybody watching right now, you need to go watch Chris's content. It's like that, but more more of that. Where can they find you?
You can find me pretty much anywhere. I obviously have my YouTube channel. You can support me on Patreon as well. I am on TikTok. I haven't been as active recently, but I'm getting back into it. And I'm on Instagram and Twitter. So you can see those things there. If you type in my name, Christopher Keaton, Chris Keaton, I tried to brand and make them all the same, but there are so many Chris Keatons in the world. A lot of it's taken, but you'll find me. Just look for my hair. I think that's probably the easiest, thing. Yeah. Yep. Thank you.
Awesome. And then the very last thing I want to do, we always want to make sure that we thank the people who make this show happen. I want to thank our crew who make it all happen. Thank you so much, crew. You guys are magic workers. Speaking of magic, that's how actual magic works. They make all this happen. So thank you so much. And yeah, I think that's it. We're gonna head out for the night. Chris, thank you so much for being my guest this evening. It was awesome having you. Thank you everybody for watching. Yeah, good. Yeah, and we'll see you next time. And remember, everybody, to always keep wanting the truth.
Watch The Non-Prophets and join the hosts in the live chat Sundays at 3 p.m. Central between the Atheist Experience and Talk Hidden. Visit tiny.cc/YTNP.